Lately, I have been having so much fun with sourdough baking. I find that when things slow down in the fall, I really get more excited to get in the kitchen and do some baking. So today, I'm sharing two brand new sourdough recipes that are either coming to the blog or on the blog. One of these will be live when this video comes up, and one I will add a little bit later. But we are making a sourdough Einkorn artisan loaf. I have had this requested so many times, and what you see me doing is I am weighing out the measurements. I am going to start putting weights and volume measurements on all of my recipes because I have probably half of the people, well, I would say 75% want volume, which is what I've always done. But I have more people lately who are asking me for weight measurements, and I'm thinking these are new subscribers and I want to be sure and have that available. So I will be doing both from here on out. I'm working on doing this with a lot of my old recipes, so it's a slow process, but I'm going to do it. Now, I used freshly milled einkorn flour. You can use all-purpose einkorn flour or whole wheat einkorn flour that you can buy in a bag already. And I'm mixing it up. Now, here's the thing with einkorn. It is a super sticky. It's a little different to work with, and so I'm going to go over a few of these tips in just a few minutes. But while that's resting for 30 minutes, I want to talk about this recipe. This is for sourdough garlic dinner rolls. Now, I used my regular sourdough dinner roll recipe, so I'll link it below as well. But I did a little twist. Now, I saw this on Instagram the other day on how to mince garlic really easy, not make a mess, and it actually worked. I was quite impressed with this method. I just put it between some plastic wrap and beat it up, and it did really well. I mixed it with some softened butter, and I'm going to roll the dough out like I'm going to be making cinnamon rolls in a way. Now, for this recipe, I did use half hard red wheat and half all-purpose flour because I am going to be photographing these for the blog. Normally, I would use all hard white wheat for these. That's what I do on the normal. But when you're photographing, when you're a food blogger, you have to kind of take into consideration that you want the pictures to be really nice, fluffy, and all that stuff. So I did use a little or about half all-purpose flour on this particular batch. But this came to me because I was thinking Thanksgiving is coming up, Christmas is coming up, and people always are looking for dinner roll recipes. This one is a little different, and we really liked this recipe. It was the perfect amount of garlic. I used 6 cloves of garlic, and the butter, I did use salted butter, and it gave it such a good flavor. And so I wanted to do something just completely off the wall and different that I hadn't done before, and it turned out really well. Now, when you're going to do this, you want to roll these out just like you're going to be making cinnamon rolls. You want to roll it out to about 1/4 inch to 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 inch thick, just a big, it's like square rectangle. And then we're going to take that softened butter and garlic, and we're going to spread it on this and then roll it up just like you're going to be making cinnamon rolls and cut them out. And it was just a fun recipe to make instead of just adding the garlic to the dough and doing it that way. I thought this would be so much fun because the shape is a little different. It looks like cinnamon rolls, and so they have a little bit more of a I guess wow effect when you bring them to the table. And it was just an idea I had, and I'm glad that I went ahead and did it. So you're going to roll these up really tightly. I mean, as tight as you can. I use a bench scraper to help me work this up. I go slow with this. I'm not in a big hurry. I want to make sure that I get it just right so that they are evenly rolled up. And it does make a difference whenever you let them rise for the second time and bake them. If you do like a loose roll, they kind of come apart and they just don't look as good when you get them out of the oven. So take your time on this part and make sure that you roll them really tight. So once we get toward the end, I like to take the end of the dough here and pull it up and over to stretch it tight. This is a place where it can mess you up. If you don't do that, it will not be quite as tightly rolled, and so I just want to make sure I pinch that really well and make sure that it's really tight, because we're going to be cutting the rolls out. Now for this recipe, it makes 12 dinner rolls, and the way that I cut them out is I cut the roll in half first, and then I cut each one of those rolls in half, and then make 3 of each of those, and that gives me 12 pretty much evenly sized dinner rolls. Like I said, I'm not like a perfectionist when it comes to stuff like this, but I will say that I try really hard to get them as close as I can. Now I'm using one of these, I think it's an 8x8 deep baking dish. I'm going to put these in. I did put some olive oil in there, and I'm going to put these in there to do a second rise for about 1 to 2 hours. I think that on this day it took about 1.5 hours, and I'm going to let them rise with a damp tea towel on top of them so they don't dry out, and then we will come back to them in just a few minutes. But for now, let's talk about einkorn. Einkorn, I get a lot of questions about it. Einkorn is a little different to work with. You will see that I don't stretch and fold in the bowl. It just don't act the same. The gluten structure of einkorn is completely different from modern wheat, and so you have to take a gentler approach with folding. You don't really do stretch. I mean, you stretch a little, but it won't stretch like modern wheat does. It is just a little bit different to work with, but does make a delicious, delicious loaf of bread. I like to take it out of the bowl on a very well floured surface, and then I like to flour my hands, and I just pull up a corner. I use a bench scraper or dough scraper to do this because you want to make sure that you have some leverage, and I barely stretch it and then fold it back into the center, and I go around and do that 4 times, 1 on each side, and then I'm going to put it back into the bowl. I was having a little trouble with my silicone mat, but then I'm going to put it back in the bowl, cover it with plastic wrap, and then let it sit for another 30 minutes. I did a total of 4 of these folds before I let it finish the bulk fermentation. So just keep in mind, as you can see, it does get a little stretchier after you wait. This was the 4th stretch and fold, and it does get stretchier. So you can build gluten structure with einkorn. It just takes a little more time and a little gentler touch. And so what I'm going to do now is just let this finish its bulk fermentation for about 4 to 6 hours, and then we will get it into the banneton basket. In the meantime, here are those rolls. Now, I would normally put parsley. I did put an egg wash, and I would normally put parsley, but I don't have any in the garden right now, and so I'm using fresh thyme. I just thought it would look nice and it would taste really good, because who doesn't? I mean, I guess some people don't like thyme, but I love it. So here they are out of the oven, fluffy. And look at that. You can see it looks like a cinnamon roll, but it's filled with garlic and butter. So good. I say that on every recipe, but it really was. Here is a behind the scenes of what it looks on a blogging day. It's a disaster. My kitchen is a disaster, but it's worth it because I love doing this. And so my husband was away this day, and he would have tripped if he walked in the kitchen. Okay, let's get back to this. This bread has fermented well. It took around 5 hours in my kitchen. And now the way you shape it is quite the same as you did your folds. You just pull it in to the center gently. You don't want to break the dough, and make a ball out of it. And then we will roll that ball over and drag it against the surface to seal the bottom. And like I said, it's still sticky. einkorn is just sticky. The least you can work with it, the better. The more you work with it, the more sticky that it gets. Now, the way that I seal the seam is, instead of like dragging it really hard like I would with modern wheat, I twist, turn, and drag really as gently as I can, but enough to build some surface tension. A note about einkorn sourdough bread, especially using whole grain, freshly milled, it's not going to get quite the rise in the oven that a modern wheat loaf will get, and that is fine. It is still absolutely delicious, and you get enough of a rise that we made sandwiches out of this, and it turned out really, really good. Just keep in mind, it is a bit different. So if you're looking for that big rise and fluffy loaf, it's not going to be quite that way with einkorn, especially whole grain like I used. Now, I did let that rest in the Banneton basket for about an hour and a half, and now we're going to give it a simple score across the top and put it in a hot Dutch oven that was in the oven, preheated to 450. We're going to cover it, bake for 20 minutes, and then uncover it and bake for 15 minutes, and we will have a delicious and nutritious loaf of einkorn sourdough bread. I hope y'all enjoyed following me on a blogging day today. Look for these recipes on therosehomestead.com. I'll link what I made in the description box below. And thanks again for joining me. I hope to see y'all soon on the next video.